right, we are joined here this afternoon with Daniel Cohen, who is the CEO of Pharmadrug, which trades on the Canadian Securities Exchange under the ticker symbol, BUZZ. Daniel, how are things?
Things are really good.
Yeah, it's been a few, probably a month or so since we last connected. Relatively quiet on the capital markets side, but you know, again, this industry still garners a lot of attention. We want to obviously get an update and have you on and talk more about the business model. And you know, when we look at obviously, you know, on the news front for you, it's been relatively quiet in the last couple of weeks after a flurry of news releases in the first quarter. So maybe you can update investors on what you are working on currently and specifically in regards to your industry-leading research related to DMT.
Yeah, so that's a great place to start with the DMT. I mean, I agree. We had a flurry of news results or news releases for a bit, and now it's been a bit quiet. And the only reason is that you get things started, and then you got to work on them, and then you get another flurry batch of press releases.
Yeah.
But you know, it's not that we're not working on things, and it's not that we're not going to have another flurry. I think May is going to be a month of flurry of news releases. So on the DMT side, you know, right away from the start, we brought on Stephen Barker, who's one of the top academics in DMT research as an advisor, and he's been doing some great work with us. And we announced that we filed for orphan drug status with the FDA for two specific designations.
Yeah.
You know, one of them being, you know, early onset of stroke, the other one being kidney transplants. And there's definitely some research there that shows that there's a potential there. But I want people to understand, and I think I've said it before, that what we're doing is that we're just staking claims. Really, we're stepping back, and we think that, you know, the proper route for DMT is to take the long road, and that's to help on foundational research, truly understanding how DMT works, what its potential is. Then we're going to choose an actual indication to go after, a specific sickness to go after, as opposed to starting with one. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, we've announced that we're going to be working with the University of Michigan. Dr. Gimo has had some, you know, really groundbreaking work done on DMT. She's the one who actually published and showed that DMT is actually produced in the brain, in the pineal gland. And we're helping her with research on the next step of, you know, next logical step in doing research. We are also talking to other groups, because what we do with Dr. Gimo is lab work. It's preclinical. We're also talking to a group, a high caliber academic group, a couple actually, and trying to, you know, figure out a good clinical study to help us understanding how DMT works. In the meantime, in the background, internally at Pharmadrug, we're working on what will eventually be our commercial strategy for the research that we're doing by ourselves in-house. In the meantime, we're collaborating with very intelligent people, building our knowledge base, and increasing our access to IP in the space.
Let me ask you, if someone asks you, what is DMT exactly? How does it work? And, you know, with regards to these trials, what are you expecting or hoping to get out of it? And I know this does take time.
Yeah, it does take time. So right off the bat, DMT, I mean, we can pronounce the whole name, but I don't think there's any value in that. DMT is the name of the drug that is in ayahuasca, and that's a plant that the shamans were using for centuries for different effects. So at the end of the day, DMT is a psychedelic substance, just like LSD or psilocybin. What makes DMT different than those other two that I just mentioned, and I'm not talking about the efficacy of the other two, I'm not at all, I'm just talking about characteristically how it's different and why it gets a lot of people excited, is that, like I said before with Dr. Gimo's work, DMT is actually present in the body. Mm-hmm. It's produced in the brain, and it has a specific function in the human brain. And so, and we didn't fully understand, and we still don't fully understand how it gets produced and what its actual, job is in the brain. We know that it's definitely related and one of the contributors to, near-death consciousness that we hear about. And so what we want to do is focus on figuring out the real biochemistry of how it works. And once you understand that, then you can start to figure out what sicknesses to use it for. Now, right. That's the reason why a lot of more people are interested in DMT right now, because the fact that it actually is naturally produced in the brain is a hint that it is useful in the brain for something, as opposed to other agents which are just introduced by taking them, in whatever way they're administered, like psilocybin or LSD. Some hallucinogens are actually not the ones that produce the impact. What they do is they stimulate further production of DMT in the brain.
Interesting.
Right? So the more work you do, the more you realize how DMT is fundamental to the whole, ecosystem of hallucinogens and the brain.
Well, the reason I ask, it seems to be garnering more and more attention. I was reading on Monday, Ireland-based company GH Research announced the closing of a $125 million Series B financing, which was co-led by RA Capital and RTW Investments, which is two big US-based biopharmaceutical investment firms. GH Research, they intend to use that money to support further clinical development for otherwise known as treatment-resistant depression. So I guess I circle back. This is garnering more and more attention. You've outlined a few things. What are some of the things that you hear as a CEO on a daily basis with regards to this research?
Yeah, well, definitely. We're hearing it, more and more companies are starting to focus on DMT for the reasons that I said before. And I actually applaud it. I want other companies to be doing work on DMT. We haven't chosen what sickness we're going after. We're probably not going to go after something like depression or PTSD or anything of that sort. As a company, our philosophy is to focus more on rare diseases. That's what we like to go after, especially given our size relative to other people's sizes. But psychedelic research, we know was dormant for many years. It was not allowed and it was ignored, and it's just gotten started again recently. And there's so much that still needs to be done on psychedelics, and that's a pro and it's a con, right? It's a con, or it's a negative in the sense that we're going to have lots of ups and downs, as many companies are casting a wide net in the research to try to understand where we want to actually, at the end of the day, really focus on. But the opportunity is that it's so early that there's so much value to be created by many of the good companies out there doing strong foundational research and fundamental research. And so I hear more and more people being interested in DMT, and I actually think it's a positive. I'm really happy about it.
I look at the industry and it has been relatively quiet, but next month, it appears that a lot of people are hopeful this turns a corner with a lot of number of things taking place in addition to your news releases that you have planned. And then as well, like some of the other conversations about a tie going public, which I think will be a big linchpin, for the overall industry. I want to focus our attention now. Let's shift to Germany. How are things progressing? What can you share with investors, and what should they get excited about as to how things are progressing as far as advancing the overall company with your business model focused on that market?
Yeah, so in Germany, we are a Schedule I narcotics distributor, which focuses on mostly cannabis right now, or THC, medical cannabis. We are in the midst of introducing our first batch and our first line of CBD, which will be a little bit of a different business model. So we've, I've said before, we've already secured the supply. We've tested it with some potential clients. We're now in the midst of literally just final packaging it in the retail sizes, and they're going to start that, selling that in May, and we'll get a test run on how much of a potential we think that business is. In terms of the medical cannabis side, we had announced that we signed a supply agreement with a global Canadian-based supplier or producer, LP, where we're keeping their name out of the business right now because
and all the investors keep asking who it is.
At the end of the day, I don't think it's that big of a deal who it is, but yeah, it is one of the larger guys, and we're just going through a merger right now, so I'm letting them figure out what their IR strategy is. But we already received shipments and are starting sales efforts there. Again, what we want to do is have 2 to 3 lines of third-party branded product. The real avenue for growth for Pharmadrug in Germany will be introducing our own product under our own brand. And that's where we're really excited. We're in the midst of expanding our sales force right now. Expanded sales force will focus on more pharmacies, but also as we bring our own product under our own brand, we're going to want to sell that to wholesalers as well. So it's a 2-pronged strategy there. And so we're in the final stages of really, pinning down what product we're going to have for the second half of the year that's going to be product introduced under Pharmadrug's own brand. We will have oils and we will have flowers in the latter half of the year under our own brand. And so we'll be able to have news on that in the short term. And so we're hard at work on that as well. So lots happening. A second supplier coming on,
Yeah.
Expanded sales force, CBD starting, and then, more clarity on how we're going to get our own line established and introduced to the market. So there's lots going on in Germany, and we'll have updates in the next month or so.
What's the feedback that you receive from Germany on the level of excitement from a consumer consumption standpoint? Germany's a huge market for the cannabis industry and CBD related, but what do you hear, as you start to gear up and put your action plan together and inch closer to obviously generating sales?
Yeah, so we're on the CBD side. Obviously, there's a lot of hunger. Europe. We're not going to go into the whole thing, but anybody who follows CBD in Europe knows that it's been a bit opaque in terms of how the regulators look at CBD, and so we're starting to get that. We don't have that full clarity, but we're starting to get that clarity. There's a lot of hunger for the product. Just companies have to make sure they do it in a way that the regulator is okay with. But there's a definite huge hunger for the product.
Mm-hmm.
On the medical cannabis side, the number of people with patients with scripts is just going up every year. And in the meantime, we haven't had that flush of product into the country, and so there's a real desire for new products on the medical cannabis side in the country. Some have been introduced over the past couple of years, but still not to the point where there's still a shortage of product. There is, Bedrocan still one of the major or the largest market share, and everybody runs out of their Bedrocan as soon as they get it. So there's a hunger for more product. Our problems in Germany has been, we just don't have enough Bedrocan to sell. We have demand for 3-4 times the amount of Bedrocan that we sell. So we're going to have to fill that with other products. Supplier we just announced, and then some of our own product.
Yeah. Big opportunity to say the least.
Yeah.
Let's focus on Sairio Therapeutics. You closed the acquisition in the first quarter.
Yeah.
Saying that, have you now fully integrated the company into your business model?
Yeah, totally. Well, just to be clear, the whole DMT effort came with Sairio.
Okay.
We brought them on. I wanted to, or the board and myself wanted to acquire Sairio, not just for cephorentine, which is the drug that we're working on, but we also wanted internal biotech capabilities, and we've picked that up with Sairio. So initiating and starting to execute on DMT is from the Sairio side. Now, in terms of cephorentine, it's quite exciting. The reality is that it's got a potential to address so many different cancers. We've already gotten from the FDA the approval or the designation of it being an orphan drug potential for esophageal cancer. We got another type of cancer that we're waiting on results from the FDA in terms of whether we're going to get orphan drug status for that as well.
Yeah.
We brought on some really high caliber, cephorentine specialists, esophageal cancer specialists. And one of the things that we've realized and we're going to be working on in the short term is let's step back and let's check a whole bunch of different cancers. Because, once you're starting down the road of a clinical study, that's what you're doing. And so let's check like 3 or 4 other cancers and see really at the end of the day what the best one to go after is. So we're ready to go after esophageal cancer and start clinical, we meet with the FDA and start the clinical trials. But I think we're going to say, hey, let's look at a few other cancers first before we say, okay, this is the cancer we're going after. But there's lots of work being done there. As you know, cephorentine, what we have is the exclusive patent to a reformulated, much more effective version of cephorentine. So a development there as well is that we actually have to start producing that cephorentine.
Right.
And we're going to have some news developments in the short term on that side as well. So there's a lot going on.
It sounds like it.
At Sairio, and you're going to hear a lot over the next couple of months. Definitely.
What's the thought process and strategy when it comes to deciding what types of cancer to research on?
So, we want the cancer that can stand to benefit the most from cephorentine.
Okay.
Right? And so that's the one that's also going to have the best economic outcome for us, right? So we want to make sure, not just what is it most effective on its own, but in terms of grouping it with the standard of care that's already out there, where is cephalosporin going to have the greatest addition in terms of treatment of that cancer? Because that's where we're, you know, as a company, where we're going to be able to make the most money. So that's what we want to make sure. We already have enough research to know that, hey, we really want to pursue the, you know, the esophageal cancer, and the FDA agrees, right? But let's just make sure that a few other cancers are maybe better, and to take a little bit of a break to make sure on that, I think makes a lot of sense.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Last thing I wanted to ask you, you touched on obviously, you know, you're filing with the FDA for orphan drug designation for DMT. How is that progressing?
It's, I mean, it's a black box. You submit to the FDA, and then you got to wait to hear the answers back. And so usually it takes 3-4 months. And these days, you know, biotech's been so hot that the FDA is, and with the vaccines and all that, the FDA has been backed up. So it might take a little longer. But the reality is, you know, in the meantime, we're actually still developing our own strategies. And so it's not like we're waiting to hear from the FDA until we decide what we're doing. We're already working on what we want to do from a commercial standpoint. So that's it. And then the last thing I think we need to talk about is super smart.
Okay.
Obviously, there's been a harsh lockdown in the Netherlands, and that stopped us from really going after and buying stores and setting up new stores. But what we've done is that we've announced this several months ago that we're going to start an online retail platform, and that should have been launched already. The reason why it hasn't been launched, and that'll be made clear very soon, is that we actually at the last second broadened the scope of that online retail platform. Essentially, we're going to be launching a sister platform in the US for functional mushrooms as well. But you know, we'll get the full update once all that's ready. So the delays have been because we're broadening the scope of what we're doing. But that, you know, we're going to hear news about that soon.
Once these online retail platforms are fully up and running, what's this give you access to? How many people?
Well, I mean, you know, we're going to, in Europe, we're going to obviously be doing the Netherlands for psilocybin, but we can address all of Europe in terms of functional mushrooms, right? And we're actually going to start going after the US for functional mushrooms. The reality is that, you know, we believe there are many different types of mushrooms that have benefits, and there is definitely a market and an appetite for all different types of mushrooms. But the reality is that we want to create a brand, and we want to create a retail operation. And yes, we're going to want bricks and mortar in the Netherlands that has a full supply chain set up, a way of doing business to be able to sell psychedelic mushrooms or truffles, but setting up that brand, making that brand well known, having that recognition out there, and setting up those avenues on functional mushrooms in jurisdictions that aren't legal yet for psilocybin mushrooms makes it that much easier when it's time, when it becomes legal. And I think it's a matter of time. It's a when, not if, that you just add that product line in, you know, in jurisdictions that we're only able to sell functional mushrooms, but the brand's already created, the channel's already created, and we already have the brand related to psilocybin truffles because of the Netherlands. So that's our plan. Yeah. So there's lots of work to do, but it's coming.
Well, you know, I've talked to a few companies, and same things, you know, obviously with COVID shutdown, there has been restrictions as far as the brick and mortar business model, but the e-commerce is just growing huge. Yeah. And I see that obviously as an incredible opportunity, as long as you're an industry leader when it comes to branding, which it appears that you have. So listen, appreciate the update. I know you're busy. We appreciate you taking the time to sit down with us, and let's keep in touch.
Yeah, let's do that.
All right. Thanks, Daniel.
Thank you.